As the Iran war hits energy markets and threatens a special relationship, the Prime Minister insists the UK won't be dragged into a wider conflict. Sir Keir Starmer resists a commitment to send military forces to protect shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, despite threats to NATO and a warning from Donald Trump.
I was not happy with the UK. I think they'll be involved, yeah, maybe. But they should be involved enthusiastically. We've been protecting these countries for years with NATO.
Obviously, our focus at the moment is de-escalating, dealing with the straits, and trying to find a way to limit the impact.
But a first intervention by the Prime Minister to protect consumers hit by the oil shock, with £53 million for those using heating oil, is a much bigger energy bailout in the offing. Also tonight, the government announces a £1 billion plan on youth unemployment. But with 1 million so-called NEETs now in the UK, is it enough? I will speak to the Employment Minister. And as Sir Ed Davey unleashes his inner party animal at Lib Dem's spring conference, we ask the simple question, why? Jonathan Gullis and Christine Jardine will be the life and soul of the party here for us for the next hour. It is Monday, I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Politics Hub. Well, as President Trump warns of a very bad future if NATO allies don't help open the Strait of Hormuz, today we had a response from the Prime Minister.
So we're working with all of our allies, including our European partners, to bring together a viable collective plan.
And Keir Starmer was more diplomatic, I should say, than some of his European allies. The German Defence Minister asked, what does Trump expect? This is not our war. But this afternoon, we did hear again from President Trump on the phone call he had with Sir Keir yesterday.
I said, you don't want to do it. We've been with you. You're our oldest ally. And we spend a lot of money on, NATO and all of these things to protect you.
What's going on the world stage matters for people at home too. Today, the government pledged a £53 million package to help people with oil heating. It is a lot of money, but for context, it is not the tens of billions we saw with the Ukraine support package and the furlough scheme. It is targeted and it is not going to help everyone. But those shocks of the last decade may have warped our sense of what is a normal level of government intervention in these not-so-normal times. Well, we'll talk a lot about that over the course of the show this evening. But first, our defence and security editor, Deborah Haynes, has tonight's lead report.
The problem is clear. The solution, not so much. Having gone to war with Iran, Donald Trump now wants the UK and other NATO allies to help combat the repercussions. Namely, unblocking the Strait of Hormuz, after Tehran made this vital waterway part of the war zone by targeting tankers with missiles and drones. The US president has so far received a lukewarm response from his friends, despite warning that his support for NATO may hinge on what they offer.
I was very surprised with the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom, 2 weeks ago, I said, why don't you send some ships over? And he really didn't want to do it. I said, you don't want to do it. We've been with you. You're our oldest ally. And we spend a lot of money on, NATO and all of these things to protect you. And then they tell us that we have a mine ship around and they don't want to do it. I think it's terrible.
Sir Keir Starmer portrayed the phone call on Sunday in a more positive light.
We are working with others to come up with a credible plan for the Straits of Hormuz to ensure that we can reopen shipping and passage through the strait. And I had a perfectly good discussion with President Trump about that yesterday.
Iran made clear any move to escort tankers and other commercial shipping through the strait would be high risk.
They are asking other countries to come and assist them so that the Strait of Hormuz remains open. Of course, from our perspective, it is open. It's only closed to our enemies, to those who carried out unjust aggression against our country and to their allies.
Of course, the best way to restore tanker traffic would be a ceasefire between the US, Israel and Iran. Otherwise, the US military would have to take the lead in coordinating any international mission to protect shipping lanes with its warships and surveillance aircraft. As for what the UK could offer, it's a lot less than in the past. Right now, the Royal Navy has no warship to hunt and destroy mines in the region, whereas it used to have 4. Also, the single major warship that has been dispatched to help bolster Britain's defences is still en route. The UK has talked about sea drones as a possible option, but they fall far short of the sort of protection provided by a destroyer or a frigate. It's the reality of defence cuts over time that's left Britain so reliant on the US for its own protection, and so exposed if Trump really does decide to go cool on defending Europe. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, Sky News has done an exclusive interview with Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister in Tehran. He issued this warning to the United States about escalating its military operations.
There's a lot of concern that the next move for your enemies is putting boots on the ground, maybe taking Hague Island, that very important oil terminal. If they do that, then they have your economy by the throat, don't they? Then they could destroy your government's ability to keep its grip on power.
Look, even suggesting that a foreign country can put boots on the ground of another country, invade another country, occupy the land of another country, is something very much rogue, very reckless, illegal, and against all international law. There is no mandate for Americans to do that, and they are doing this because they are so drunk of power. They think that they can do whatever they want, and this is not the case.
There are thousands of US Marines on the way. What happens if they get used, do you think?
We defend.
What does that mean, though, for these Marines if they were to land in Hague Island?
Just read what happened in Vietnam.
Well, doing that interview, as you can see, was our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is one of very few international journalists inside Iran reporting on the war. And you can watch more of his interview and that reporting on The World tonight at 9 o'clock. Right, let's bring in our panel for this evening, shall we? The former Conservative MP, Jonathan Gullis, who's now with Reform UK, and the Liberal Democrat MP, Christine Jardine. Thank you both.
Hello.
Lots to talk about. Jonathan, what's your position on the Iran war? Because there have been a few variations in Reform UK.
Well, I think it's been quite clear from the get-go, which is Nigel said, and rightly, that we should have allowed our bases to be used by the Americans, our allies, when it came to their actions, but did not mean we should take part in offensive actions. But we should have also been preparing in advance. It was quite clear this armada from Donald Trump was on its way to the Middle East to make sure that key military sites such as Cyprus were indeed ready and protected for any action or retaliation, should I say, from Iran. Look, the reality is this does need to come to an end as soon as possible. High oil prices leads to higher prices at the petrol pumps. It will inevitably damage household energy bills. And this is the period now where Ofgem's currently checking for the next round of the energy price cap. And, of course, will have an economic impact on many businesses, potentially energy-intensive, such as ceramics that I represent in Stoke-on-Trent. So this is a very worrying time indeed, and the Prime Minister is right to say we need to see this whole conflict come to an end as soon as possible.
Just quickly on reforms, but, we had Andrea Jenkins on, and she was talking about potential for boots on the ground, that not being off the table.
Nigel ruled out immediately ever deploying boots on the ground, and he is right with that.
Do you think party discipline needs to be a bit better?
No, I think it was quite clear from Nigel that he is the leader, and he said there should not be any British boots on the ground. I entirely agree with him on that. And any idea that there could be boots, even deployed by the Americans, is, for me, the wrong course of action here.
OK. Christine, what do you make of the state of the special relationship at the moment?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's right not to go into war. And I wonder if Jonathan can clear something up for me. Nigel's saying a lot about the war, but he wasn't at defence questions today and he was on the order paper. I mean, is everything all right? I mean, why wasn't he there? It seemed a bit odd when we're at war, we have defence questions. He's on the order paper and he didn't turn up to ask a question, and he wasn't at any of the statements, as far as I know.
What Nigel does brilliantly is put himself out there in front of the British people, taking many questions from journalists. In fact, the most questions of any party political leader in this country over the past 12 months, and therefore being held accountable directly by the people.
But not actually standing up in Parliament at a time of war when we're all concerned about it for his constituents.
Let's try to not just talk about Nigel Farage, because this is bigger than
Yeah,
Nigel
it's
Farage,
much bigger than Nigel Farage.
We've heard Donald Trump, once again, not very happy with Keir Starmer. Do you think we need to change our stance with Donald Trump?
No. I think Keir Starmer, and I don't often agree with him, but I agree with him on this. He's put our national interest first. He's not doing what Donald Trump wants simply because Donald Trump says that that's what America wants us to do. He's put our national interest first. And I don't think that it would have been good for our national interest to allow the Americans the bases in the first place. I do think it's important that we defend our sovereign bases in Cyprus and we defend British people who've come under attack in the United Arab Emirates, in Qatar, Bahrain, and that we support our allies in defending them against these attacks by shooting down the drones. But I do think he was right not to get involved because, as far as we can discern at the moment, this is an illegal war and that is in no one's interest. We need to de-escalate it and we need to encourage the Americans to see that this may not have been a wise idea.
The German defence minister is saying this is not our war, we've not started it. Do you think we need to hear more of that sort of thing from Keir Starmer?
No, I think Keir Starmer has been quite consistent that, you know, he will take defensive action, albeit, let's be quite honest, it's been quite embarrassing at how slow we've been able to deploy. In fact, whether we've been able to deploy any of our naval vessels at all to protect, in Cyprus, for example, an important RAF base, which we've therefore relied on the Greeks, the Cypriots and the French to have our backs. And I think there is an important thing that we need to remember here, that whenever our defence has been weakened by both consecutive Conservative and Labour governments by not investing properly in them, allowing them to shrink to the smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars. Whenever we are in need of defence, we are calling on the Americans to help us out. And so I do think Donald Trump has a right to feel aggrieved that whenever there is an element of us asking the Americans to get involved, we expect them to come straight away. When he's asking for a bit of assistance, even if we don't agree with it, we should at least engage properly in those conversations because, as I say, American lives have been put at risk time and time again, and it has been the West's security barrier for many, many years. And he rightly made, for example, NATO members actually increase their defence spending, which is long overdue.
OK, Christine, I see you want to come in.
NATO is a defensive organisation. It's for the defence of Europe. It's for the defence of the United States. It's for the defence of the Western Hemisphere. It's not for attacking other countries. When America was attacked, 9/11, we did stand by them. If America had been attacked in this, then we would have stood by them. But America is the aggressor in this with Israel. Therefore, NATO does not have a role to go in just because the Americans do it. It's not an aggressive agreement. NATO is a defence agreement for the defence of the Western Alliance.
Were not paying up for the defence, and we were overly reliant on the Americans. And as for the aggressor is Iran. Iran, who are state-funding terrorists like Hamas and Hezbollah, who have got terrorist IRGC agents on the streets of this country, which the Prime Minister has rightly pointed out, has been fueling the war in Ukraine with their drones that are killing innocent Ukrainians on the ground. They are the aggressors, not the Americans.
That's a different issue. In this war, the Americans have attacked Iran, and we are in a defensive alliance with them. We do not need to go and take part in an attack on another country. Keir Starmer is defending this country, and that is important. The difference between attack and defence in this is critical, and we all know. The other thing which is madness in this is that he's loosening the sanctions. Trump is loosening the sanctions on Russia, which is going to be devastating for Ukraine. Now, how can we possibly support that when we've spent 4 years rightly defending Ukraine, and the government today reasserted our defence of Ukraine, the fact that Europe will stand up for Ukraine, and yet Donald Trump is undermining that by loosening the sanctions on Russia, which will give them billions of dollars every month.
Do you think Donald
to use
Trump is
against
undermining
Ukraine?
that?
No, I think we need to absolutely tighten the screws on the Russians, and there's particularly around sanctions around oil that could absolutely be tightened up and made to really punish the Russian economy, to really put Vladimir Putin in his place. But the coalition, the willing, isn't really willing. It's only really, from what I can see, the British and the French who are willing to deploy troops in Ukraine as a defence mechanism. All these other countries have talked the talk, but not willing to put their armed forces or their troops on the ground. And we don't even have a battle-ready plan to deploy people to Ukraine because, again, we've hollowed out our armed forces, again, both under Conservative and Labour-led governments for decades now, which is an outright disgrace and embarrassment to this nation.
OK, thank you both. We will come back because there's lots more to talk about. The impact of the war is also having political and economic ramifications closer to home. As we've said, the Prime Minister today set out a £53 million package of support for vulnerable households struggling with the spiralling cost of heating oil. Those who heat their homes with oil are not covered by the energy price cap, so they are exposed to more immediate energy price hikes. Well, our political editor, Beth Rigby, had this question for the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, people are worried sick at the prospect of their energy bills going up by £300 or more after June. The Conservative government back in 2022 capped bills for all households through an energy price cap. It cost about £40 billion. You're not going to do this, are you? Can you just level with people that wealthier households are going to have to suck some of this up?
In relation to a wider point about energy bills, because I do know how worried people will be about this, and as I said, I've been to a number of community centres across the country where you can feel that, and I'm not surprised. We're not ruling anything out, but it is very difficult to say at this juncture what the position will be in July, which is when the current energy cap runs out, or what the position will be in September. And obviously our focus at the moment is de-escalating, dealing with the straits and trying to find a way to limit the impact. My instinct is always to help working people in a situation like this, hence the energy price cap that we put in place. In fact, reducing energy bills, which is one of the measures at the budget, and making sure that is held until June. The work we've done on those that heat their homes through oil, which was a real cause for concern, particularly in the tail end of last week when people were beginning to fill up their tanks and they could feel for themselves. And this is an area where, in addition to what we can do through the money we've been putting in today, whether it's that or petrol, I'm absolutely determined to clamp down on anybody who may think of ripping others off in a situation like this. I've heard too many stories of deliveries being cancelled in order for the price to go up. Have to clamp down on that sort of ripping off. But I'm not going to say to you now, because so much is unknown, what we might do in July. We are going to have to do what we can do now to de-escalate, keep this all under review. And as soon as it's necessary to say anything further, I will obviously do so. But it's simply not sensible to say that in a number of months' time, not knowing what the situation will be, that the following will be ruled in or ruled out. So that's the approach that we're taking.
Well, as you can see, our panel is still here, and John Craig, our chief political correspondent. Why, John, do you think Keir Starmer has done this?
I think he got lobbied on this when he went to Northern Ireland last week, because he learned that 60% of people in Northern Ireland heat their homes with heating oil rather than conventional gas supplies. And he's been told a lot of horror stories about people being ripped off and having their bills absolutely shoot up. He talked right at the beginning of his long news conference this morning, actually. I grew up working class in the 1970s. I remember how it feels when you're struggling to make ends meet. It's a knot in your stomach every time the bills come through the door. And then later on, he announced this measure. And it is something that... well, he talks about jacking up prices. He says there are accounts of suppliers cancelling orders and jacking up prices. It's completely unacceptable. And so he said he's making this announcement today. But he was lobbied on it in Northern Ireland. Now, the opposition parties, fine as far as it goes. I spoke to Ed Davey. He said it's a start. And he said what he would like to see is a VAT holiday on heating oil and also Ofgem regulating heating oil. This was Kemi Badenoch talking about the Prime Minister's announcement.
I'm pleased to see that they've responded to our calls to do something about heating oil. But the fact is, they're still talking about increasing fuel duty. They're not doing anything about all of the levies on energy bills. The government has complete control when it comes to that. But most importantly, I think, given what's happening globally, we need to start drilling in the North Sea. It is completely crazy that we're leaving our oil and gas in the ground while importing it, including from countries that are digging and drilling in that same basin.
So, fuel duty, that's something that the Conservatives have been talking about a lot in the past week or so. You'll remember Prime Minister's questions last week. It was Kemi Badenoch kept going back to talking about fuel duty. The Prime Minister, you heard him say in answer to Beth's question, too early to say because we don't know how long the conflict in the Middle East and Iran is going to last. And the other thing, of course, that the Tories are very keen to talk about is drilling in the North Sea. Drill, baby, drill. That seems to be the Tory policy, but there's not much sign of Mr Miliband doing that. But clearly energy is suddenly shot right up to the political agenda because of what's happening. And I drove past a petrol station this morning on my way to work. I think it was 1.44 or 1.45 for unleaded, and I bought some there about a week or so ago. It was only 1.37, so there you go.
John, thank you so much. Good to know your petrol purchasing habits. As well as being the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in 2022, Jacob Rees-Mogg also unveiled a huge package of support to help businesses and organisations with energy price rises in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we spoke to him a little earlier. You were in government when there was a huge package of support. You were the Business and Energy Secretary after the war in Ukraine broke out. In hindsight, do you think that those billions that were spent on that support package was right?
I think it was because of the scale of the price increase. So gas prices at their peak were 9 times up from where they had been. And when we looked at it, almost every business would have been out of business, that nursing homes with their heating bills, but even companies that seem to use very little energy, you increase it by 9-fold and they can't keep going. So that's why we had such a big package of support. This increase is from $70 a barrel of oil to $100 a barrel. It's not quite 50%. So it's important, it's a problem for the economy. But we need to get it in proportion to what happened in 2022, which was much bigger.
I think the government will probably be looking quite closely at what you did as they look at the energy price cap in June. In hindsight, is there any lessons you think could be learned?
Well, I very much liked the scheme that was proposed to me by one of the people running the electricity companies, actually, that you do it in a way that people then pay you back, so that you help them for an interim, and then they pay steady bills for a period as prices fall. I thought that was rather a good way of doing it. It wasn't done at the time, but I think subsidising everybody for a long period of time is unrealistic, and we are at risk of getting into prices and incomes policy territory because of inflation. What we really need to do is go back to the other thing I did, which was to have an energy supply task force, which was looking at our long-term energy supply, including domestic sources, including fracking and shale gas, to make sure that we weren't so dependent on supply shocks.
Do you think that, depending on what happens next, there is a possibility of a bigger, more blanket support package, and would that be right?
I doubt that energy prices will go up as much as they did in 2022. It's interesting, then people on heating oil were hardly affected. The oil price didn't move very much in 2022. It was the gas price that moved. This time, at the moment, it's more on the oil price than on gas. Gas is easier to absorb. And so I don't think it's necessary at this point. But it is so important that we have long-term energy supply. And this is where the government's getting it wrong. So Starmer said today that what we need is more renewables. The renewables they've just contracted for cost more per kilowatt hour than gas would, even when the gas price has just gone up.
Well, they would argue, no, that this is about long-term planning and jobs of the future.
And long-term planning is cheap energy from the shale gas that we're sitting on top of and using the North Sea, and making sure that income is for the United Kingdom rather than sending all our money abroad.
You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. We'll discuss with our panel whether the government should be preparing for another big bailout for energy consumers. Well, the government action for heating oil is designed to protect people from the immediate spike in prices, as they're not protected by the energy price cap. A little earlier, Sky News spoke to residents in rural Derbyshire about the impact.
I have to be careful now because of the situation, but it will last us like till September, October. But like if it was like November time and it's been cold, it'd be on all the time. But we've got a log burner as well, so we tend to use the log burner, and that keeps the house nice and warm where we're sitting, and it gets too hot actually, so it's nice to go into a cooler room. But I don't have the oil on as much as I used to because I can't afford them prices.
It's like say all the heating is off completely. Water, we need the hot water really. We've got children as well, so there's nothing we can really do about that. It's just luck of the draw if you've got the oil in the tank. We tend to buy it in the summer when the prices are usually at the lowest, so actually, yeah, we're probably going to be struggling. Who knows, it's just hoping really that there'll be some support out there and they'll cap those prices for the heating oil.
Let's bring Jonathan Gullis and Christine Jardine back in, shall we? I mean, we've touched on this. Do you have any sympathy for the Prime Minister? You talked about turning a corner in the new year, and then this?
This was out with his control, but I think he does have to do something. I know what it's like to live off-grid for years in Aberdeenshire. We had, it was LPG that we had. You do worry about the price. And I'm fortunate now I don't have a petrol car, but if you are driving in a rural area and you have a petrol car and you have an oil tank in your garden, this is very, very painful, and he does need to do something about it. As John was saying earlier, Ed has called for a VAT holiday on fuel because I think we have to recognise the damage that it's going to do to household bills.
Do you think the government are going to get blamed for this if prices do go up?
Look, I think there's inevitability that whoever's in charge will bear the brunt of public anger. I certainly saw that for myself in the last government after COVID and obviously the war in Ukraine. But I do have some sympathy for the Prime Minister. Of course, Christine's right, this is out of his hands, and this targeted support is, I think, highly and rightly appropriate. But I also think the Prime Minister has made a rod of his own back. At the end of the day, no new oil and gas licences for the North Sea. That's absurd when you have that natural resource in the ground that we could be exploiting and adding to the supply chain. And, of course, decisions like not retaining the 5p cut in fuel duty, which actually I campaigned for when in Parliament, and retaining the freeze on the inflationary rise.
They might look at fuel duty.
Well, they might, but that's not giving certainty to people right now when the price at the pump by the RAC reckons has gone up by 13p since the 28th of February. And, you know, John said the Conservatives are talking about it. Well, I'm glad the Conservatives are following where Reform UK is leading when it came to that particular campaign, and we've got a very detailed plan where the government can make the decision now to give those assurances, because it's not just people driving their kids to and from school or on their way to work or their mum and dad to see a GP. It's the haulage companies in places like Stoke-on-Trent. This will have a massive impact. My grandfather drove HGV lorries for his entire career after serving in the Royal Marines. This is a very worrying time for those in that industry, and of course higher haulage costs means higher prices on the shelves in our supermarkets.
Do you think they need to level with people more?
Yeah, I think if there's anger at the government, it will come over how they deal with the crisis. People accept that this crisis was not created by this government, but it's how they deal with it going forward that will either people will respect and will win them back support, or will just make them angry if they don't do more to support people who are facing really high bills, not just for the fuel at home, but as you say, for drivers, for the companies, for the energy-intensive businesses, all of that. If they don't do something to help get everybody through that, then they will face a lot of anger from the public.
But doing that, I mean, that costs a huge amount of money.
It does. But Ed has suggested the VAT holiday. But, I mean, I sympathise with Ed Miliband. Yes, we do need to move to renewables. I've got an electric car. I do everything I possibly can. Like most people now, we are very aware of it. But if you are living in the Highlands, particularly way up on Wick, where you can see the Beatrice oil platform from your window in some cases, and oil is going through the roof, and the government's talking about not making use of the resource that is there to get us through it, then I think that's very difficult for people in parts of Scotland, in fact, in all of Scotland, to take on board. And I think the government's going to have to think about that. I'm not suggesting and would never suggest that we go down the Tories baby drill route with Trump. And no, we have to move away from that. The North Sea is a declining basin.
But do you think there should be no
licenses?
licenses?
At the moment, we need to use what we have better than we're using it at the moment. And it'd be much better for us to use our own fuel than be importing it from abroad.
But I suppose they're saying that people are fulfilling their existing licences and they are drilling in the North Sea.
Yeah, but I think that we do need to look at how we do it better, how we allow that resource to be used much better than it is being used at the moment. And at the moment, there's a kind of resentment in the North Sea and of the North Sea, and we need to get away from that and recognise that at the moment, getting people through the remainder of the winter and, you know, towards next year is the important thing. Yes, long-term renewables are our future, and the North Sea is a declining basin, a dying basin, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater on this.
So you want to come in, John?
Well, you'd understand with renewables, Ed Miliband's doubling down on net zero is not only choking the life out of the ceramics industry in places like Stoke-on-Trent, which obviously cannot just move to renewable because there is no renewable energy sector that's reliable enough for those companies. So we would further deindustrialise our great nation into the hands of China and India, who are not using a level playing field when it comes to globalisation and free trade. And therefore, we should put in the British national interest first and making sure that those companies are protected. And of course, the reality is, you know, the net zero stuff sounds nice on paper, but actually is adding huge cost to our energy bills. No. And that's coming from Ofgem themselves when it comes to the energy price gap and is squeezing people at a time when they need more money in their own pocket.
But we know the fuel's running out in the North Sea, so we need something else. And we need renewables to replace it.
Thank you both. I know this is a hotly contested issue. That story is sure to feature heavily on our late night programme, The Wrap, tonight from 10 o'clock. Here to discuss all of today's big stories and the best of tomorrow's papers will be Kevin Maguire, columnist at the Daily Mirror, and Baroness Forster, the former First Minister of Northern Ireland. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, help for the young to get into work with a £1 billion government scheme. I will speak to the Employment Minister. Well, a new £1 billion fund, which aims to create 200,000 jobs, will incentivise employers to take on young people. Announcing the new youth jobs grant at a college this morning, Pat McFadden, the Work and Pensions Secretary, seemed keen to stress that he didn't believe young people were somehow suckers and snowflakes. That's how he put it. But he did emphasise the government needed to help the 58% of young people not in education, employment or training who have never had a job. A little earlier, I asked the Employment Minister, Dana Johnson, whether easing business rates would be a better way to encourage employers to take on young people. So these plans is about offering incentives to the hospitality sector to take young people on. Would it help, but crippling business rates is obviously a big part of the problem. Would it help to ease those?
Well, I think that's not really the case, what you've just described. This is probably the largest package of support for young people who are out of work in a generation. It's about helping people get into apprenticeships. It's about helping them when they've been out of work for 6 months by offering an incentive, a grant to an employer. And for those young people who've been out of work for longer periods, up to 18 months on universal credit, it's about offering them the opportunity of paid work, 25 hours a week, paid at minimum wage. So it's about supporting young people at the various stages that we are concerned about when they are not in work, because we want young people to be earning or learning. And unfortunately, as you know, we have nearly 1 million young people who are neither in employment, education or training.
But I suppose there needs to be a viable hospitality sector for them to work in. And we know, we've heard directly from businesses about the impact that business rates are having, about the impact of national insurance and, of course, the national minimum wage. That is stopping businesses that we have directly spoken to from hiring young people.
So, first of all, this is more than just about hospitality. It's about all sectors, first of all. But I absolutely recognise there are certain sectors like hospitality and retail where there have been reductions in the number of job opportunities for young people over a number of years, actually, particularly in retail. What this is doing, though, is recognising, and employers are saying to us, you listen to what the Federation of Small Businesses have said about this package of support.
Youth unemployment, I know it's a long-term thing, but it has spiked. Do you take some responsibility for that?
Well, look, if you look at the figures around young people not in education, employment or training, 250,000 joined that nearly 1 million figure now under the previous government between 21 and 24. No action was taken. And I think what I'm trying to set out to you today is we recognise there's a problem. Of course we do. It's a generation that are losing out on opportunities. This is our opportunity now to set out a number of things to do to support young people and businesses, because we cannot waste the talent of all those young people. I just want to go back to on hospitality, though. There are particular issues there, and you will know that the Chancellor has set out a number of steps to support businesses in the hospitality sector, including pubs in particular. But if you also listen to what Tom Kerridge has said today, who obviously runs a number of restaurants and hospitality settings, he recognises and welcomes what we're doing with this package.
Ultimately, is this in part about bringing down the welfare bill?
This is about not letting a whole generation of young people lose out on the opportunity to work. We cannot have young people not given the opportunity to earn their own living.
My question is it about bringing down the welfare bill as well?
I think I listened to the Secretary of State today who made a speech at Waltham Forest College, and what he was talking about is moving from a welfare state to a working state, where we support people into work. That's our objective here, to give those young people an opportunity to earn a living, because what we know is it's not only good for them to be earning, it's good for their mental health and well-being, and also it's good for the British taxpayer.
And do you think welfare spending set to reach more than 400 billion in about 5 years' time? Is that sustainable?
Well, look, again, I would say we've inherited a system that has problems, and what we're trying to do today is address one particular part of the system around supporting young people into work. We've also got the Milburn Review looking at what else we need to do around young people in employment. We've got the Timms Review looking at disability benefits and how we can best support people who have disabilities or long-term health conditions to make sure they have the opportunity to work as well.
Do you think you've been wrong to frame welfare in terms of cuts rather than how you're framing it today?
I want a system that's giving opportunity to people, and that's what the Secretary of State talked about today. Support people into work. Also recognising there will be some people with very severe disabilities or health conditions who will not be able to work, and we need to support those individuals.
Yeah, it feels talking to you like, you've learned the lessons from that welfare rebellion, which was all about you framed it as being about cuts, and now you're talking about increased opportunity. Is that because you're speaking to those backbenchers?
Well, I wasn't a minister in the DWP when those debates were going on. What I can tell you today is this is very much about about moving from welfare to work and supporting people. I meet lots of people, young people, disabled people, who want the opportunity to work. And so alongside this announcement today, we also have Connect to Work, Work Well, again, to support people into work, to really help them get those opportunities that you and I had when we were perhaps a little younger.
OK, let's bring Jonathan and Christine, our panel, back in, shall we? Christine, I mean, is this... young people, this is definitely a problem, isn't it? Whether it's student loans,
that figure is
about today.
That figure is astonishing. That 58%. We do need to help young people get back into work, but something like the national insurance contributions increase didn't help. That made it much more difficult. And yes, now they're doing something about hospitality, but in Edinburgh, we've got a massive hospitality sector which supports so many young people into work for their first jobs, like many other places in the country. And they've been hit incredibly hard by the national insurance increases. Employers are struggling. And, this is a step, but I don't think it's far enough. We need to change the national insurance. We need to pay young people more than we are at the moment. We need to raise the basic level of payment for them. And Diana was talking there about the opportunities we had when we were young. Yeah, I had opportunities, but I also grew up at a time when I saw a lot of people around about me struggle to get into employment, find jobs in the Thatcher years, and the Youth Opportunities Programme and all the rest of it. And long term, they didn't work. The thing that works is growing the economy and creating jobs that people want. And that's what this government has to do.
What do you think, Jonathan?
I think it's quite insulting for this Labour government to try and pitch that they're helping out in industry or helping young people using British taxpayers' money to subsidise work when they're the cause of the problem. 16.2% youth unemployment, the highest in Europe for the first time in this nation's history. Unemployment overall up to 5.2% because of decisions this government made, from raising national insurance, the jobs tax, which has had a damaging impact on employment, as well as equalising the national living wage for an 18-year-old with a 25-year-old, that many businesses I speak to across Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire said has been a major put-off for them hiring young people, because ultimately that 25-year-old is going to have far more skills and experience than the 18-year-old, and you're more likely to hire that individual because that benefits your business longer term. So this is just some piecemeal to try and bail out this government from the poor decisions they've made and the ruining of the economy, with inflation 50% above target. I know they say it's dropped, but it's dropped after they got it 100% increased. Seen the debt at levels at one of the highest on record in borrowing, which has therefore meant we've got over 100 billion per annum on debt interest payments alone. I'm sorry, it's a clown show, and I don't take these people seriously when they talk about it.
OK, thank you. We'll come back to you. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, the Lib Dem leader puts on a dazzling display for his party's spring conference.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety, as Russian drones will be trying to find this position.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment. We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful.
With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force. This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real. Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans. The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
Liberation Day.
By popular demand, here we are.
Donald Trump. It is quite the story. Wherever it goes, on Trump 100, we go with it.
Can you tell us who you're looking for?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
Are you overstating the reach and significance of this deal?
Not like you said it.
From the UK?
Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
It was 10 feet from him, and all of a sudden the shots rang out.
People impacted.
I'll tell you on another day on the podcast what that was all about.
Join us wherever you get your podcast.
Well, let's return now to the strains facing the so-called special relationship and NATO as Donald Trump continues to criticise Keir Starmer's decisions. Well, joining me now, I'm pleased to say, is Kay Bailey Hutchinson, who was US ambassador to NATO during Donald Trump's first term. Thanks so much for joining us. How would you describe the relationship right now between NATO and the US?
Well, thank you for having me, Ali. You know, obviously, this is a time when we're going back and forth. It's not the best circumstance, certainly. We've always considered, and certainly when I was at NATO, UK was such a strong ally, and we did things together always. And so this, you always understand that each country has their own considerations. I think the president believes that it is in all of our interests to clear the Straits of Hormuz so that we will have the capability to help allies get the heating oil they need and the natural gas, and opening the straits. It shows that Iran is an adversary, and they are playing a game that's very dangerous for the whole world that depends on much Middle Eastern oil and gas production.
Do you think Donald Trump's got the tone right, though?
Well, I think that we all have come to know the way the president thinks and the way he talks. And certainly, I don't. I wouldn't communicate maybe the same way he does. I think that in the main, the big point is that all of our allies would be helped if there was a contribution to clearing the Straits of Hormuz. Everyone needs that oil and gas for their own populace to have the heating that they need right now and the electricity. So all of that is the point. I hate to see our two heads of state disagreeing in such a public way. I don't like that, because UK is our wonderful ally. And hopefully this will smooth out and we will get help from the allies who can help, because it is in the interest of the whole alliance that we have, that everyone get the oil and natural gas that comes out of the straits and they are depending on.
You are someone who's worked closely with Donald Trump, and I suppose, you know, everyone is trying to understand what he's thinking. What do you think he's thinking when it comes to Iran? You know, do you think he has a plan?
Oh, for the war, yes. I think we have taken terrorist attacks now for 47 years from Iran, and we take it from their proxies. They don't even stand up and do it themselves. They support other suicide bombers and terrorists to do their dirty work. And I think the fact that they have killed so many of our own people, as well as their own people, it is right to try to keep them from having a nuclear capability with a ballistic missile range that could make it to Europe or to eventually the United States. It is in all of our interests that we keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon. And look at what damage North Korea can do just in their shorter range area. But the ballistic missile problem has been there since I was in NATO. And it is very important to all of our allies that we not allow Iran to have a nuclear capability, which we think they were continuing to work to do, with a ballistic missile range that gets to Europe. So I think it is in all of our interests that we continue to fight this out, finish this job now, and hopefully the people of Iran will be able to have a better life, but also our allies will be safer from a nuclear capability.
Okay, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, US Ambassador to NATO, thank you very much for joining us on the Politics Hub this evening.
Thank you.
Well, when Emmanuel Macron appeared in front of the world's elite at Davos wearing aviator shades, the French president at least had an excuse for his unusual accessory, an eye problem. Fast forward a couple of months, and in the somewhat less rarefied surroundings of the Lib Dem Spring Conference in York, Lib Dem leader Ed Davey had no need for medical excuses. He took to the stage to the sound of Bonnie M's Daddy Cool to give the Lib Dem faithful their regular dose of Davey, dressed naturally in mirrored sunglasses.
Please welcome the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey.
Right, let's bring our panel back in, shall we? Jonathan Gullis and Christine Jardine. Christine, your leader, what do you make of that?
The first time I've seen it.
How have you missed it? It's gone viral.
Oh, I had to work very hard. I wasn't at conference because I had personal things, and we have an election coming up in Scotland, which is quite important. But that is actually the first time I've seen it.
Is he, he is getting a little bit of pushback for not being serious enough. What do you make of that?
Well, I think Ed likes to show both sides of his personality, and I think it was conference, it was for the members, it was a way of breaking the ice with his speech.
We do all need
I think, but that is the first time I've seen
at the
it.
moment,
So, yeah,
don't we?
We do.
I'm sorry to say, I just think it further embarrasses Ed Davey and further embarrasses the Liberal Democrats. And Christine, I think, is an example of one of the best parliamentarians I certainly saw in my time in the House, and a very serious politician at that. And I think Ed Davey is responsible for helping tank the Liberal Democrats in the polls. And I suspect before the next election, he won't be their leader going into the next general election.
He's responsible for us having 72 MPs,
And
Jonathan.
there was some singing at the Reform Party conference, if I remember correctly.
All I say is that you won't catch Nigel Farage pulling silly stunts like that. What you will see is a serious Nigel Farage, as he is consistently, explain to the British people about what it is that we'll do for the country. But I'm sorry to say,
I've seen Nigel Farage.
We've seen a poll with the Liberal Democrats at 9%, and I am gobsmacked that in a time when you've got a Labour government so unpopular and a Conservative Party still suffering after 14 years, that the Liberal Democrats aren't the beneficiaries. It's Reform UK and the Green Party, and frankly, the Lib Dems are seeping into irrelevance under Ed Davey's leadership. And I promise you this, I bet we'll have a different Lib Dem leader come the next general election.
Ed Davey is the most successful Liberal Democrat leader since, in fact, he's the most successful Liberal leader since, 100 years ago. He delivered 72 MPs. Now, OK, you are always, despite the flattery, Jonathan, you're always going to be, critical of the Lib Dems, but you have to give him credit for what he's achieved.
OK, we've got to say goodbye on that serious note. Thank you both. That is it from us tonight. We will be back tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee, and of course, after that, The World Tonight with the latest from Iran. Thank you so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, we'll be live in Kent amid a deadly meningitis outbreak. A year 13 school pupil and a university student have died, while 11 others are seriously ill in hospital tonight.